Who is it?
It's Philip Scorza. Can Jerry come out to play?
Philip Scorza? Get off my property. Well, Pidge.
Oh, hi, Sheriff Todd.
What's the matter, my boy?
I'm really depressed because I want to buy this really neat gun, but Mom won't let me have guns because she says Dad was killed in the war.
Well, Pidge, I think you ought to buy the gun anyway and shoot the guy that wants to kill the president and save the country.
Golly, Sheriff Todd, you're really wise.
Of course.
And tall. And now we presume, by looking over there, now we presume that you can actually go in there and rent the movie suddenly and watch Frank Sinatra.
I suppose you can check it out there. And anything else you may want to rent, you know, Debbie Does Newhall, whatever.
I wanted to take this opportunity to think about an old friend. I only knew Jerry Reynolds for 1 year, the last year of his life. But our work together during that year left a lasting influence on me. Hello, my name is Philip Scorza, and I'd like to welcome you to our show, Points of Interest. Jerry Reynolds was a founding member of our Historical Society and its first curator. He's the man who set up the museum at the Saugus train station. For the next 30 minutes, I'd like to share some wonderful video moments with Jerry Reynolds. Long before I started making my show, Jerry tried his own hand at putting together a video history of Santa Clarita. Here are some excerpts from that tape. Let's listen as Jerry tells us all about Henry Mayo Newhall.
When Henry Mayo Newhall bought the place that would later become known as the Newhall Ranch or Newhall Land and Farming Company, he might have known something that few people knew at the time, and that was that the railroad was coming right up through the Santa Clarita Valley. It was in 1876 when they built between Los Angeles and San Francisco. Along the way was the great San Fernando Tunnel, boring through the mountains at 6,950 feet. It was the third longest tunnel in the world at the time. Out at Lang Station in Soledad Canyon, 5,000 Chinese hammered their way up one side and down the other of the Soledad Canyon, finally coming together at a place called Lang Station. There, a golden spike was driven by Charles Crocker on September the 5th, 1876. After that, everybody went down to Los Angeles for a grand feast at the big hotel, and from then on, trains, engines, cars have rolled up and down the Santa Clarita Valley. I thought it might be nice at this moment to pause and take a look at Henry Mayo Newhall himself. This photograph is contained in a book written by Ruth Newhall called the What else? Newhall Ranch. The town, of course, was not named by Henry M. Newhall. It was named by the Southern Pacific Railroad. It was a train depot originally up around where the Saugus area is today. Because of a declining water supply system, the whole town moved southward in 1878 and relocated at what is now Market and Railroad Avenue. Behind me are some pictures of old Newhall on the wall. This is a lithograph done in 1878 showing what is supposed to be downtown Newhall. You can see the Newhall sheds for the depot right in through here, the train just pulling in. At that same time, Henry Mayo Newhall built the Southern Hotel, which is located right here. This line running right through the lobby of the hotel would be today's Market Avenue. Coming down across the back would be Newhall Avenue, as it is today. I tend to think that this lithograph might be somewhat exaggerated because we have an actual photograph of the hotel taken sometime between 1878 when it was built and 1888 when it burned to the ground, and there it stands right there. Here's the main street of Newhall, a very busy, crowded Saturday afternoon, no doubt. Main Street is composed of a couple of general merchandises and 4 saloons. One of the more prominent saloons, more or less catering to the oil men of the times, was known as the Oil Exchange. The Oil Exchange was a well-known hangout for local, mainly oil men. This was located about 6th Street and San Fernando Road in today's Newhall.
Here's Jerry telling us about three early prominent citizens of our town: Judge John Powell, Constable Ed Pardee, and Alex Mentry.
After Tiburcio Vasquez was hanged in 1875, the Los Angeles Board of Supervisors decided that we needed law and order out here. At that time, the Soledad Judicial District was established, and the first judge of the Soledad was John F. Powell, a native of Galway, Ireland. Powell had been ranching over in the Big Rock area, did such an outstanding job making treaties with the Indians that they brought him in here to handle the Soledad Judicial District, which was actually established May 5th, 1875. The photograph you're looking at shows the judge right here with his wife, Flora, and their children out gardening at the house next, in fact, right across the street from the train depot. The judge lived for many years, finally passing away in 1923. He was the oldest judge in the Los Angeles judicial system at the time of his death. Meet Mr. Ed Pardee, who came to the Newhall area from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He was involved in oil drilling out there and was asked by Charles Alexander Metry to come to Pico Canyon to help with the drilling operations in that region. Ed moved into town about 1897 and bought this house. It was called the Good Templars Lodge. And if you look behind Ed's head, between he and the horse, that building is still standing. Ed had a good eye for horse flesh and actually owned the livery stable here in town. Ed's livery stable certainly seemed to be the place to be in the 1890s and early 1900s. This was located on Railroad Avenue, about directly behind the Newhall hardware store today. Meet Charles Alexander Mentry, who was actually born in France. In 1845, at the age of 7, he was brought to this country by his parents, his father, Peter Mentry, being employed in the oil fields around Titusville, Pennsylvania. Mentry grew up with oil in his veins, you might say, and when the fields began petering out back east, he drifted to San Francisco, landing in 1875. He was employed with several drilling companies working in Clarita Canyon and Pico Canyon, finally working for Pacific Coast Oil Company. It was in 1876 that Charles Alexander Mentry rigged up a 3-pole derrick and began drilling a hole in Pico Canyon. Mentry drilled in Clarita and came up with white oil. You may ask, what's white oil? Well, take a look at this. White oil comes up out of the ground in a refined condition, just as you see it here. It's so clear you could actually read a newspaper through it. It was displayed in Philadelphia during the 1876 centennial celebration, and it was quite a hit back there, especially in those oil-rich regions. White oil can be used right out of the ground. It doesn't have to be refined. You can pour it into a kerosene lantern, use it to heat your house. In fact, as late as the 30s, Tommy Walker was driving his tractor by using white oil and just dumping it right into the vehicle and letting it run the way it is. The wells have pretty much died out. This is about 1 day's production back there in Clarita Canyon.
A community effort to save the Saugus train station was the first priority of the Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society. In 1980, Jerry Reynolds gave us a tour of the recently moved train station and spoke with pride about it.
In 1887, Newhall got a neighbor 3 miles up the road, in fact, in the very spot where Newhall used to be. The Saugus train station was built at that time when the spur line was connected over to Ventura. Saugus Station was sort of a self-contained community, you might say. Shortly after it opened, there was a little business established called Tollefree's Eating House. In 1898, Tollefree's sold out to the Woods family, and this was the beginning of what today is known as Saugus Cafe. Eventually, the Saugus Cafe, in fact, 1905, moved out of the station and across the street to the location where it's still at. This is some sort of traffic jam, perhaps people on their way over to Hoot Gibson's Rodeo Arena, which is now known as the Saugus Speedway. Downtown Saugus as it appeared in the 30s. The Saugus Cafe hasn't changed much. The drugstore was located about where the old Surrey Inn was situated. In 1887, Southern Pacific Railroad built a train station up at the junction of its line with the Ventura spur line that ran clear up into the Santa Barbara region. A station called the Saugus Depot was established at that time. Since there was already a Newhall, the station was named for the birthplace of Henry Mayo Newhall, Saugus, Massachusetts. The first station agent was a fellow named Alexander Isaac Frazier, who lived in the top part of the station, that upper part that you can see down below us there. There are a number of notable visitors at one time or another, including President Benjamin Harrison, Theodore Roosevelt, and Herbert Clark Hoover. Finally, Southern Pacific abandoned the station, and it was going to be torn down until the Historical Society got involved with it. Through a tremendous community outpouring, some $60,000 was raised, not only by big corporations donating huge sums, but little kids kicking in nickels, dimes, and quarters. The station finally moved 3 miles down the road from Saugus to its present location in William S. Hart Park, Newhall. It is now open on weekends as a museum, and if you'd like, we'll go down and we'll take a look inside of the Saugus Depot. I'm holding here a golden spike, actually driven out of Lang Station, and this was the spike, of course, that united Northern with Southern California. So if you go rushing out to Lang looking for a gold spike, forget it. We've got it here. Around me, we're trying to recreate the way train station ticket offices would have looked in the 1880s, 90s, early 1900s. And moving from one end of this to the other, the desk is authentic, 1920s. These are the switches which you could move back and forth in order to change the rails outside, switching trains from one track to another. We have a number of logbooks and timetables here. Back in the corner, the scales used for weighing packages. The typewriter has an interesting history. It was used by One Bull, the nephew and adopted son of the famous Sioux chief Sitting Bull. One Bull wrote the reminiscences of his illustrious ancestor on this particular typewriter. This is where the tickets were kept. Down here is a telegraph key, telephone, and of course a radio that you could turn on and perhaps listen to Amos and Andy or I Love a Mystery, Glenn Miller. And what is out of sight down here in the corner is the bell off of the engine from outside. I'll give you a little taste of what it sounds like. How was that? And again, out of sight, the old switchboard back up here on the corner. Well, thank you for visiting the Saugus station. Hope you can come back again sometime.
I first met Jerry Reynolds in 1995. I introduced myself to him and told him about my show, and Jerry said, "Let me know if there's anything I can do to help." Well, we ended up doing 5 shows together. I think above all else, Jerry was a wonderful storyteller. With his words and rich voice, he could make history come alive. Let's listen as Jerry tells us about Beale's Cut, the outlaw Tiburcio Vasquez, and Don Pedro Fages and the first Catalonian volunteers.
And of course, by 1861, the Civil War broke out. There was a lot of gold and silver mines out here. People needed a better way to get in and out of this valley. And what you're looking at right now is the better way. This is the 1862 version of Interstate 5.
This is it, yeah.
This is it, yeah.
This was built by Edward Beale, right?
Yeah, the cut was actually made by Edward Fitzgerald Beale, who happened to own the Tejon Ranch, which was 297,000 acres of cattle and trees that he wanted to get to market too. Mm-hmm. So actually, he was a general, you know.
Right.
And so he went down to the L.A. Board of Supervisors, got $5,000 from them. Anyway, he went on up to Fort Tejon and called out the Army. Remember, this guy's a general. You don't argue with generals. No. So the Army came down, actually made a 90-foot deep slash through the mountains there. As soon as they were done, Beale set up a toll house down here at the bottom of the grade.
Good thinking.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
You know, Yankee ingenuity. He was from Washington. What do you expect?
Yeah, right.
So he actually charged upwards of $2, depending upon what was coming along, to use his new and improved road here.
Right.
This Vasquez Rocks is one of his many hideouts that are used throughout the state. In fact, the place is really peppered with Vasquez hideouts, and this is probably the most famous, and of course it is now a county park. And
I always wondered how you got a county park named after you, and now I know.
well, just be an outlaw, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, though, you know, the guys that tracked him down, Sheriff Billy Rowland and Captain Mitchell, of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, they didn't have a park named for them.
No,
You know,
of
you'd
course
think
not.
they
Of
would
course
have
not.
something, you know.
But Tiburcio was a celebrity in his time, right?
Oh, yeah, really. I mean, he went on for 20 years,
Yeah.
you know, pulling this stuff off. In fact, he used to knock off whole towns up at Hollister and Kingston and various things. He'd just go into town, tie everybody up, move everything that wasn't nailed down, and off he'd go.
Right. He was captured finally, what, about 1875, was
In
it?
1875, they finally captured him, took him to town.
Now, weren't they also doing a play? I mean, when they put him in jail, didn't somebody, like, immediately write a play and put it on stage, heralding his life or something?
Oh, yeah, you can kind of compare him to, you know, what's O.J.'s book now.
Right,
you know,
right.
But at the time, Tiburcio was actually selling postcards of himself.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Oh.
and for a quarter apiece. And a few days later, after he was tossed in jail, these endorsements appeared in the L.A. papers, you know, say, Mendel and Myers has the finest clothing store in town, according to Tiburcio Vasquez.
He should know he robbed it several
Right,
times.
yeah, absolutely. And then, like you mentioned, you know, they had a play, The Life of Vasquez, and the producer actually wanted Vasquez to come over and play the part of himself.
Oh, sure.
Well, the sheriff drew the line at that point.
A smart move.
Right, absolutely.
He'd have made one good exit, and that'd have been it.
But who knows, might have started another career, you know, he might have been the John Wilkes Booth of his day or something.
Yes.
But unfortunately, Tiburcio was hung in 1875 up in San Jose. The name Grapevine actually dates way back to 1772. It began when a Spanish lieutenant, or actually a captain by that time, Pedro Fages, he was in charge of the Presidio down at San Diego, and during the night, 6 of his men went running off with 6 comely young Indian maidens. And so Don Pedro took a rather dim view of that and rounded up some of his troops, first Catalonian volunteers, and went tearing off looking for his troops, who'd run off, of course, as I mentioned, with the girls. Best soldiers will do even today.
I've heard that.
That's right. Anyway, so off they went, and of course they went out of San Diego, north over the Cajon Pass, into the Mojave Desert, and finally down the Santa Clara riverbed. In fact, Pedro Fages left such names as Agua Dulce and Soledad Canyon behind, which were still in use today.
He got to name all those places.
Oh yeah, he named all those places, sure.
And he was still searching for the 6 soldiers that ran off with the comely,
with the Indian girls, yeah. Anyway, the troops finally in the spring came right up from where we're standing, and at this point he paused and noticed that there was an awful lot of grapevines growing around here, what they call big red Cimarron grapes. So what he did was name the place Cañada de las Uvas, the Canyon of the Grapes.
Cañada de las Uvas.
Right.
Okay.
And on he went on down to the San Joaquin Valley. Well, he never found the soldiers, but he had a hell of a good time. He was one of these guys just loved going out exploring. But
and he got to name everything.
He got to name everything, right. According to the Indians, the soldiers went up here in the Tehachapis and lived with the Indians until their dying days. And so kind of like the mutiny on the Bounty, only mutiny on the San Diego.
and so the name Grapevine actually comes from grapes which grow natural in the area. Are they still found in the area?
Oh, yeah, you can still find them. You don't find them around here. We're in Lebec. But a little bit farther down, going down toward the little town of Grapevine, you can see them growing up in the hills, things like that. Yeah.
Jerry Reynolds was born in Torrance, California, July 16, 1937. He and his wife Myrna were married July 20th, 1957. They had 3 sons. Jerry worked for the state of California for 30 years. The last 25 years he worked for the Water Resources Board and was stationed at Castaic Lake and the Vista del Lago Visitor Center.
Vista del Lago is a brand new museum. It just opened in November of 1993, and it's full of all sorts of state-of-the-art exhibits and razzle-dazzle displays and hands-on activities for the kids. Well, the adults like that too, you know, right?
Yeah, I know.
And of course, as you mentioned, a fantastic view of Pyramid Lake. The lake itself is part of the State Water Project. The water brought in here and, in fact, completed in August of 1974. So the lake's been around a lot longer than the visitor center has. But like you say, we're very close to the freeway, very handy, a nice place to stop. And we have a lot of people running in here to use the bathrooms and sometimes stay a couple of hours.
Take care of those overheated radiators, too, probably.
Also. As a matter of fact, the State Water Project is the largest water system in the world. You can check it in the Guinness Book of World Records. As a matter of fact, the guys up in the space shuttles flying around up in the atmosphere, when they look down on the ground, they can see only two things made by human beings: the California Aqueduct and the Great Wall of China. Aren't you impressed?
And what is this we are standing inside of here?
Well, this archway represents one of our water pipes. It's 13 feet in diameter, and actually, if it was full of water, there'd be 1,250,000 gallons pouring through here every minute.
Oh, really?
So hold your breath.
From floor to ceiling,
From floor to ceiling,
Oh.
if it was full, yeah. Yeah, this is one of our smaller pipes. The pipe between here and Castaic Lake is actually 30 feet in diameter, about twice the size of this one.
Jerry Reynolds had a wonderful sense of humor. We laughed a lot together, and I could think of no greater gift than the gift of laughter. Here's Jerry Reynolds with a gift for us all. Until next time, this is Phil Scorza for Points of Interest.
But this is a beautiful room, very relaxing. Waterfalls, chirping birds. I've always wanted to camp out here because there's no ants or snakes or anything.
But you can't have a campfire here.
No, they won't let you build a campfire in here. It'll probably take a very dim view of that. You know how those Forest Service people are.
Yes.
And then, of course, in the center, you can see the Great Seal of the state of California. Since I work for the state, I must always genuflect when I come by here. So we take no tax money.
So we take no tax
No,
money
no, we
here.
sell water.
Okay,
Yeah. And the next time you flush, think of us.
Okay, I will. Thank you. Well, this is pretty steep. I'm just wondering if how many horses do you need to get up through here?
You would need 6 to pull a
Oh, you would?
stagecoach,
Okay,
yeah.
so it's...
And of course, the old freighters usually use teams of oxen to have these big, powerful oxen pulling up. In a lot of cases, there's reports that the passengers just flatly refused to ride up here anyway, and they got out and hiked up the hill.
Well, they hiked up it.
Yeah, right.
Did they have to pay a toll to walk through?
Yeah, it didn't make any difference whether you rode or walked. You know?
Anyway, you went through here, alive or dead, you paid a toll.
Carried you in a coffin, whatever. You know. Right. Well, it had several different names. The first stage stop listed on Butterfield's line was King's. And of course, Butterfield arrived here the first stage on October 21st, 1858. Imagine that. It only took 21 days to get from St. Louis to San Francisco. It was a land speed record, you know. People were breathless.
This is our next stagecoach stop. It's called Mud Flats, is that right?
Yeah, Mud Spring.
Mud Springs, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can see the springs in back of us down there. The place was named for. There was an adobe here, and about 10 years ago, a local historical society petitioned the owner to save it, and the owner responded by running a bulldozer through it. So
Well, we're not going to invite him on our show, then.
no. No, the other guy was much more cooperative. It was a cold and blustery night in November of 1929, and one of those big 5,000 series engines came roaring out of Saugus Station, made the bend down at Bouquet Canyon, and slowly started chugging up the long run here in back of the Saugus Speedway. At this point, the train began rocking back and forth with sparks flying out of the drivers. It looked like some sort of drunken sailor, until finally the engine heaved over on the side. The engineer himself was scalded, screaming, running down the tracks. The passengers were in a great state of panic and started leaping off of the cars, which fortunately actually stood upright. And into this mayhem, this bedlam, this sheer hell, came this little man, only about 5 foot 8 inches tall. He calmed everybody down, said, "Sit down, there's a relief train on the way, don't worry, everything's cool, just get back inside of the passenger cars and wait." So everybody very calmly got back inside of the passenger cars, and the little man pulled out the biggest .44 revolver you ever saw and robbed them right here on the spot.
And his name was?
And his name was Thomas E. Vernon, generally called Buffalo Tom Vernon.
Tell us about the shootout out here on the streets of Acton.
It was in about 5 o'clock in the evening, January 20th, 1903, when Norm Melrose was going down the street with a ladder, and Broom bumped into him, and there were some words exchanged, and actually Broom kind of followed him down the street a little ways, calling him everything but a Christian, and whereupon Melrose spun around, whipped out this .45 caliber revolver, and shot at Broom. Broom returned fire with a big Winchester rifle. Several shots were exchanged. Broom fell down in the street. Melrose came over and stood over him. Of according to the Acton Rooster account, and pumped about 4 or 5 more bullets into him, which of course ended the feud right there.
Yeah, made sure he was good and dead, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. Jerry Reynolds, can you tell us where we're going to go today and what we're going to see?
Well, since you want to do something about the grapevine, I thought maybe we'd go over to Lebec. We'll talk about the Indians that lived there, some of the first Spanish explorers. We'll go over to the site of the original village of Keshtuk that is now known today as Castaic, and see where the name Castaic came from. We're looking down at the original Castaic Lake, not that phony thing that Water Resources built many years later. But cutting right down through the valley that we came up is the San Andreas Fault, and it's joined here by the Garlock Fault. And of course, because of this depression down in the ground, over the years rainwater has collected, and right now we're looking at the original Castaic Lake. And of course, later on in 1776, Father Garces came through. He was a remarkable person all by himself. He hiked across the whole southwest and up into California and on into the San Joaquin Valley.
Now, was this still an Indian village in the 1700s?
And he stopped here and again met with the Indians, and they exchanged food and gifts and one thing along another. But that's Father Garces always amazes me when you read about him. I mean, just all alone, you know, no motels, no villages, no nothing, you know. Boom, here he goes.
Well, we've had a real nice tour of Vista del Lago. I'd like to thank you, Jerry Reynolds, for being on our program and showing us around this really neat, interesting place. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on our program and telling us a story about the stage line. I hope you'll come back and do another show with us sometime.
We had a good time learning about bad men of the Santa Clarita. It's been very educational. And I'd like to thank Jerry Reynolds, the curator for the Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society, for taking us along on this tour, telling us the story of... Jerry Reynolds died February 28, 1996.